Hi, welcome to HowtoDandD. My name is Fred Wheeler and today I want to talk about Dungeons and Dragons, and we're talking about the Lost Mine of Phandelver. This is a Dungeon Master's Guide, and this particular topic is going to be covering the next Dungeons and Dragons adventure that you run after the Lost Mine of Phandelver, which is often a question I get asked, and so I thought I would address that particular issue. Now, I'm going to make it really clear now that I am going to be covering spoilers from pretty much every single adventure that Wizards of the Coast has ever published for Dungeons & Dragons 5e, including a few adventures for the Kobold Press people. So if the topic comes up and you see on your screen a title that looks like a particular storyline that you do not want to have a lot of information on, probably that's when you want to skip away from the video, okay? As I said, unlike my normal videos, instead of just presenting everything first, I'm going to present sections of it and I'm going to check the chat as I go before I move on to the next thing I want to discuss about what adventure you should run. It's the only way I can think of that it's going to work successfully in any way whatsoever. So let's have a talk about it. Let's talk about the Lost Mine of Phandelver. You've run your adventure and you're looking at your next adventure after they have completed their adventure around Phandelver. What is there? There must be a published adventure that can be run after the Lost Mine of Phandelver, right? And I would think that Wizards of the Coast would be the one who would publish that video. Oh, sorry, not video. Well, it would be nice if they published a video as well, but published a book or adventure that covered, from level 5 onward. But the honest truth is that there isn't. There really isn't one. Not that does it in a way that I feel is successful. Now, I will explain what I mean by that as we go, and what I'm really talking about is Storm King's Thunder. There was an attempt there to actually build it in to the Lost Mine of Phandelver in some way. But most of the Wizards of the Coast adventures, they run from levels 1 through to 10 or level 1 through to 15, and they don't really operate very well if you introduce them after running the Lost Mine of Phandelver. And Wizards of the Coast's adventures are not really user-friendly. The only one that I feel is user-friendly is actually the Lost Mine of Phandelver and the Curse of Strahd. Those are the only ones. And the Curse of Strahd I still feel requires a level of skill, whereas the Lost Mine of Phandelver I feel is still a beginner's adventure compared to everything else that they're putting out for Dungeons & Dragons 5e. And you're going to need an adventure that really starts at about level 5 plus. Level 5 would be the best option, right? You don't want to be having to do a huge amount of work. And when I ran the Lost Mine of Phandelver, I actually stopped. I actually completed it. I went from level 1 to level 5 with my player characters. We ran through the map location. I did everything that they wanted to do. And I stopped, and then I started a new campaign at level 1. So how is it that I can possibly answer a question like this? Particularly since you're going to be finishing up Wave Echo Cave and you want to progress from there. So what are the best options for a Dungeon Master? Well, here is where it is. I'm going to start off, and this is in no particular order. What I've done is I've selected the first few things I talk about are selected based on the concept that I think that they will work best for you if you are a new Dungeon Master and you're running Lost Mine of Phandelver and you're leading into another adventure. Does that make sense? So the sequence and order that I go through as I pop things up on the screen is not a special order or sequence in terms of what is best. I would say the first 3 that I give you are based off that, and after that it's in no particular order after that, okay? That's just how I've done it. So what is the best option for a new Dungeon Master or a Dungeon Master coming out of the Lost Mine of Phandelver? So what you don't really want to have to do is create a new adventure yourself or homebrew it. But I think Wizards of the Coast actually intended for you to run Lost Mine of Phandelver, and hopefully by then you would be fairly familiar with the game system and how things work, that you would have a go at making your own adventures. But I'm not going to suggest that you try and create your homebrew adventure. That's not what this is all about. I would suggest that the best way to get this adventure to move forward past Lost Mine of Phandelver is you need a short adventure, and I would say between 30 and 40 pages maximum. It needs to be easy to run with a good layout. That means indexing, a good contents page, and obviously it needs to have a good story that your players will be interested in. And I couldn't really find anything till recently. The first one I want to talk about, and that is actually Tales from the Yawning Portal. Tales from the Yawning Portal is a little unusual in that this particular adventure is not a straightforward one long campaign. It's set out as a collection of adventures. It's a range of shortish adventures, I would say anywhere from 25 to 35 pages, most of them, which makes them ideal from moving from Lost Mine of Phandelver into something like whatever you play after that. In particular, the reason I think it's so great is because some of the adventures just seem to line up with the Lost Mine of Phandelver. And the first one is the Hidden Shrine of Timochin, starting at level 5. And also, if you don't like the idea of running the Hidden Shrine of Timochin, hopefully I pronounced it correctly, the Forge of Fury, which is for level 3 upward. Those two adventures, personally, I think are great. Forge of Fury is about 30 pages long. The Hidden Shrine of Timochin is about 35 pages long. There's only one adventure in the Tales of the Yawning Portal, or Tales from the Yawning Portal, that is one that I would steer away from, and that's Dead and Thay. It's a huge location, it's very confusing, and unless you're skilled, it's going to be difficult to pull off. But you can run these in sequence if you wanted to, or you could run them and then stop your campaign after running the Hidden Shrine of Timochin or Forge of Fury. Now the Forge of Fury is designed for level 3 and your players are going to be level 5, so you might find you need to make a little bit of adjustment, but it probably won't be much. These are classic Dungeons and Dragons adventures. So these are adventures that were put out many years ago by some of the best designers and writers that have ever made Dungeons and Dragons adventures, and they have been updated. That's what makes them so good, because whether people agree with me or not, I think that some of the older adventures in terms of their design and layout, but particularly their length, they were about 30 or 40 pages and that was it, are perfect for any dungeon master compared to 256 pages and committing to a campaign that will take you a year or 2 years and plays from level 1 right through to level 10 or level 1 right through to level 15. That's why I think Tales from the Yawning Portal is definitely worth your look. And you can let me know in the chat if you agree or disagree. I'm fine with that. I wanted to sort of just highlight some of the things that I did notice with the Hidden Shrine of Timochin, and that is there are a couple of walls of text. Now when I say wall of text, that doesn't mean that it hasn't been formatted with headings and so forth, but because of its sheer length and because they have taken that adventure and tried to translate it over pretty much word for word, there are times where you will find yourself sort of having to read through anywhere from 8 to 10 paragraphs to get an idea of what's going on in a particular location. So it's not perfect, but as I said, I didn't think there was a perfect solution to this. I think this is one of the better options available to you. Now, you could always push your players up a little bit, a couple of levels, and just feed them straight into White Plume Mountain. White Plume Mountain is not a particularly good story. It's really just a great, huge, fun house dungeon. But the Hidden Shrine of Timochin and Forge of Fury are pretty good, and they're pretty solid. I've read through the Forge of Fury. I haven't run it, and I haven't run the Hidden Shrine of Timochin, but I do know some people who have, and they seem to be having some success with that, so that's good. Okay, so that's the Tales from the Yawning Portal. Right. If there's anything you want to discuss about the Hidden Shrine of Timochin or Tales from the Yawning Portal and embedding it or linking it up with the Lost Mine of Phandelver, now is the time to start asking those questions, okay? Because I'm going to move on to the next one, which I think is probably just as important. So I'm going to move that book out of the way and I'm going to grab the next one. And this isn't actually published by Wizards of the Coast. This particular book is published by a third party who do a very good job. And I actually love their stuff. I've run a couple of their adventures already, which is why I'm suggesting it. And this particular adventure is the Book of Lairs. This is, yet again, a collection of small adventures that you can run in your game. And what is so fantastic about what Kobold Press has done is not only are they short, they are very short. Now that can be a good thing and a bad thing. They're about 4 or 5 pages long. Each one is very simple. That doesn't mean that they aren't interesting or fun. That's not true. They are simple, they are clear, they're well laid out, they are easy to find information. They're interesting, and they are a lot of fun to actually play and to run, which is why I think it's a great idea. The only hassle with something like the Book of Lairs and running that particular set of adventures is you're going to find that some of them are just a bit too short. If you wanted something a little bit longer, you might find that's not going to work for you. I would say you can string together a couple of these without having to make too many modifications and you'll be fine. It won't get you very far. That's the only thing I say. It'll get you so far, but not all the way. If you want to get yourself to level 10, that's going to be quite difficult with this book. But it's a good start, particularly if you don't want to commit to anything too soon. So something like Castle of the Sand, which is set in a desert oasis. Nice adventure, very simple and easy. Involves sarcophagi and desert location. There's the Pirate's Cove, which is for level 5 characters. Darren's just talking about Prepared. Also Prepared and Prepared 2 from Kobold Press. As it happens, we're going to come back to that, Darren, because I was going to talk about that as well, because it is a very good choice. These are a little bit on the pricey side. They're probably more, in terms of page count, they're probably going to cost you more than Wizards of the Coast's books, which I know sounds terrible, but it's just true, okay? I don't want to hide the fact. The fact is they are going to be a little bit more expensive. There's also the All-Seeing Eye. Each one of these locations and adventures, which is only 4 or 5 pages long, has a major baddie, a major villain. So you explore the location. It's usually only got maybe at the most 10 to 15 areas on the map. And once you've done that, you face the big baddie or monster near the end. And they selected some very nice ones, some really unusual monsters. Including some that you will be fairly familiar with, but they're also utilizing the Tome of Beasts. So if you don't have that book, it's going to be a little bit awkward. So that's why I mean pricey, because you're buying that adventure and you have to get yourself a copy of the Tome of Beasts so you can run the monsters. Now, not all the monsters are from the Tome of Beasts. Some are from the Monster Manual for Dungeons & Dragons 5e, but not all of them. And certainly the big baddies aren't. And these big baddies they're not the cakewalks that the Monster Manual monsters are. They're a lot harder. So that's my view. Book of Lairs, particularly if you don't want to go too far past level 5 and you're happy to just run some very short adventures with big baddies and monsters mixed up in all of that. So as Darren was talking about, there is another book produced by Kobold Press, which is very good. I have that book. I've used it a couple of times already, and man, this is such an awesome book. And they've produced a second one now. This is called Prepared, a dozen adventures for 5th ed edition. They're very short. They're not going to get you very far. They will supplement something like the Book of Lairs or something else that you're running if you need to sort of chuck a bit of stuff in. It's like a 1-page adventure. You can prepare it in 5 minutes. That's how quick. I've done a review on the Book of Layers. I've done a review on Prepared, so if you're not sure about it, you can go and check those out. And I actually flip through and show you everything, okay? It's not like a surprise. So it's not like you're going to have to buy the book and find out what you're getting first. And they've also put out another one called Prepared 2. Same sort of concept, also done by Bold Press. Also excellent for your purposes, particularly if you're not completely sure what you want to do straight off the bat and whether you want to sink into a really long-term adventure. Now, in the contents page, it actually states the adventure name and the player level suitable for that adventure. So the Clariot Wellspring, which I've run, which is in a desert location, is for levels 4 to 5, and you could run that, or the Room with the 5 Corners. This is for levels 6 to 7. Both are, like I said, they'll last about one session, so you won't get very far. After that, you're going to start running out of material, and you'll find yourself having to either find filler or make a decision about what you're going to do with your game from here on. You might find by then that you're happy to start creating your own stuff. But Prepared is a really good book. Okay, so we've talked a lot about options for you, and I've talked about the third-party options in particular, and I really suggest considering using them because they are really good. You know, Prepared and the Book of Layers, fantastic. I am so happy, although that Prepared cost me quite a lot of money, I can run one of these even if I have no time after work. I can pick this up and I can have it ready to go in 5 minutes. It's just amazing. That's why I like it so much. Okay, I just need a drink of water, guys. It's going to be a lot of talking on my part. And I'm glad that Darren brought up Prepared and Prepared 2. That's good. Okay, so the next adventure, from here on out, in no particular order of importance, I'm picking the Curse of Strahd next. And the reason for my picking the Curse of Strahd is because I like the adventure a lot. In fact, it's one of my favourite adventures that they have put out. And for obvious reasons. Because it's really well done. And it's based off one of the most popular Dungeons and Dragons adventures ever created, which is Ravenloft. That's my opinion, anyway. I can see that somebody's just piped up about Prepared. I want to just pop back there. What I'm going to try to do is when I'm talking about a particular topic, I'm going to pull up that screen so you can navigate through this a little bit easier later on. Does that make sense? Just to make it just a bit easier just to navigate. So Nicholas, use both of Dib's Fortress as random encounters. In my game, these are really versatile. Yes, they are. Yes. Those are the very early adventures that you can utilise. And essentially, look, even though they are set at particular levels, if you're running at level 5, you don't always have to make it about combat. You could just run a session and have it be about roleplay and let them just go through the process of negotiating or intimidating or scaring the goblins off. That might be perfectly fine. But yeah, Prepared is a really good adventure. All right, let's get back to Curse of Strahd. Thank you for that, Nicholas. That was excellent. All right, back to Curse of Strahd. As I said, one of my favourite adventures for this particular version of the game, and I honestly think it's probably better than Ravenloft. Now, don't freak out and run away on me because I said that. I have run the adventure Ravenloft, but this is Ravenloft on steroids and just a lot more of it. That's really all it is. They didn't change Ravenloft. All they did was add additional information around that location, which just made it that much more interesting. And it was so deadly. But it's not suitable for working in with a Lost Mine of Phandelver. So even though I think it's a fantastic adventure to run as a campaign from level 1 to level 10, or wherever you finish, it's not really very good as a tie-in for the Lost Mine of Phandelver. It's better to run that as a standalone campaign, in my view. It is a solid horror adventure, so it's not your fluffy fantasy standard adventure. It's a horror story, and it's not going to be something that a lot of people like. If you don't like that sort of thing, you won't want to play The Curse of Strahd. But it is well laid out. It is well structured. The contents page is broken up into small chunks. You can get yourself from one place to the next without having to hunt through the book for everything. It's not really an absolute beginner DM adventure, because it is a bit of a sandbox, and it does cover like 250 pages. Due to its size, there's some of the aspects that come into it, so you still have to read the entire thing, and then you should be able to navigate through it and find what you need as you go, even if you don't remember the details in that particular location, because it's so well laid out. Everything, there's keys on maps to find stuff. Now, I know people are thinking, okay, but Fred, that's all very well, but I want to run The Lost Mine of Phandelver and then go into The Curse of Strahd. Okay, I don't recommend it. I still feel like it's something that you should be running if you are slightly experienced as a dungeon master, just because its very nature. So horror is a little bit more difficult to do than just standard fantasy. But if you're going to do that, I would chop out Death House. I don't want to do that, but it's going to be covering like levels 1 to 3 roughly, and so you should still be able to get through your adventure if you just ditch Death House completely. It's a real shame, because I think it's a fantastic location, but it's just not going to be suitable for level 5 characters. It's just not going to be scary enough. Whereas if they're going through the other locations, level 5 characters are still going to have a bit of a handful. They're still going to have a little bit of trouble to deal with. I found that my players, no matter what level they were, even at the higher levels, were still having troubles with the adventure, and they did things roughly in a roundabout manner. They went from here to there, and they left Ravenloft Castle to the very end. Okay, so that is my suggestion. If you must use The Curse of Strahd, ditch the Death House, and just, okay, I'll run that some of the time as a different campaign or just a separate adventure when I feel inclined, and just run the adventure as is without that stuff in the appendix. Okay, so that's the covering of The Curse of Strahd. It's odd that an adventure that I like so much I can't really recommend as an adventure to use with your Lost Mine of Phandelver, but it's just don't feel like it's going to work. Okay, so the next one that comes up, and I'm going to need to drink some water, otherwise I'm going to shrivel up, and that is Hoard of the Dragon Queen. I have a particular dislike for Hoard of the Dragon Queen, but I know people like to run it, and that is a fact. And if you want to run your Lost Mine of Phandelver and then move into Hoard of the Dragon Queen, it's actually reasonably easy for you to run, because it's set up like this. It's mostly linear. It goes from one point to another, and when you go from one location to another, it's a small sandbox that they can navigate round. Once they're finished in that little sandbox, you then get onto the railway train and move to sandbox number 2. And that's essentially how it's laid out. So it's actually really good for somebody who doesn't want to have to deal with too much variety for the players to actually select, and where things can go off the page too much. That's not to say that it won't happen with the Hoard of the Dragon Queen. It is generally easier for dungeon masters to run. That's my view. But you need to skip the beginning. If you want to limit the amount of work you have to do, I would skip the first 4 episodes. So that's episode 1, 2, 3, and 4. Why are we doing this? Well, 1, they're just trouble. And one of them, episode 2, I feel is an awesome episode. Even episode 1 is awesome. It's just trouble. And you're already up to level 5 or 4 with Lost Mine of Phandelver, and you can enter the story later on. You don't have to enter it at episode 1. You could move in and start at episode 5, Construction Ahead. That's what I would advise you doing. Start them off in Waterdeep. Somebody else did all the legwork leading up to this particular point. Now, the reason I suggest doing this is because, one, you will eliminate some of the repetitive and annoying aspects of this adventure. One of them is episode 4, On the Road, which is appalling and annoying and just, yeah, I didn't really find that it worked very well. There is not enough experience points within this adventure to get them up to the level that they need to be anyway. So you could, if you really must, truck them back a little bit and not worry about it, because even if they are level 5 and they start at episode 4 or 5 because you feel you need to do that, you could, because there isn't enough experience points to get them from level 1 to level 8, which is what Hoard of the Dragon Queen says will happen. It's just there isn't enough experience points. It's just a fact. I know it's always been the case, and we had all sorts of headaches with the Dungeons and Dragons Adventurers League. Okay? It also leads into a really awesome adventure. Hoard of the Dragon Queen has a great finish. There is a flying castle of all things. Honestly, a flying castle. Who would not like that? But it leads into one of my favourite adventures, and oh my gosh, the Rise of Tiamat. Oh man, I had so much fun. It's a lot of work for a dungeon master, particularly because you won't find enough experience points to get them up to the level they need to be, and you're probably just going to use milestones or just fiddle things a little bit to make it work. But it really is a role play, the Rise of Tiamat, and there's a mixture of combat as well. And it's one of my favourite adventures, and I know that my players really enjoyed the Rise of Tiamat, much more than anything else. Hello Eric, good evening to you. How about Storm King's Thunder? Well Eric, we are going to talk about Storm King's Thunder, but not just yet. Let me get there. It's coming up. We haven't done it yet. I've left it deliberately, okay? Alright, so that's what I would recommend you do. Start at episode 5 with Hoard of the Dragon Queen, lead into Rise of Tiamat if you feel like continuing playing, or the players continue wanting to be engaged in the Tyranny of Dragons storyline. Do that. That'll work reasonably well. Okay, now that I've talked about those particular adventures, the next one. This is one of my least favourite, and I have slagged the snot out of this adventure so many times. But I know I need to discuss it because it's come up a few times already. And that is Princes of the Apocalypse. Holy Toledo. What the heck is this adventure doing? I don't know. I ran part of this adventure. So how do you go from the Lost Mine of Phandelver into Princes of the Apocalypse? Well, honestly, there's no good entry point. There's literally no good entry point from the Lost Mine of Phandelver into Princes of the Apocalypse, because it's such a shocking adventure. It's a massive, it's a huge sandbox adventure. Hugely complicated links in terms of what's above ground, what's below ground, and what links whatever's below ground to other locations below ground. Hence, it will drive people nuts. So unless you have an index, it's just going to be too much work. And I don't recommend using Princes of the Apocalypse. And yes, I know that's not an answer that you want. So you want to know how it can work. It's such an average, poor story. And it's got a terrible layout. And it requires massive preparation and massive re-preparation to make it work. And the lead-in is so poor. The Mirabar delegation just gets lost along there. You've got to pull it all apart to try and find out what the heck's going on. It's just not a strong lead-in, which is weird. Why is it that this adventure, which should work well, it is located close to Phandelver? Red Larch is close to Phandelver. All of the locations that are discussed are so close to Phandelver, and yet it doesn't work. It makes no sense whatsoever, and I realise that. So when people say, well Fred, this should be the one that works, I have an index. For those of you who haven't already got it, I have an index I put together on Princes of the Apocalypse so you can navigate through this hoary thing. You can find it on the Facebook group HowtoDandD. Just join the group and download the file. Okay, it's on the file section. That is my that is my opinion of Princes of the Apocalypse. So how do you build in the Lost Mine of Phandelver and link in Princes of the Apocalypse? Well, my view is you need to ditch all of Chapter 6, which is essentially all of the bits and pieces that are going on around Red Larch. Just get them to Red Larch. Forget about all the little side treks and stuff. Forget about dealing with some of the random encounters and bits and pieces that they have provided you in the book. Desserin Valley, I believe, has a lot of that. And then Arms and Executions is Chapter 6. Skip Chapter 6, skip Chapter 2 or good portions of it, and just state that the Mirrorbar delegation has gone missing and they were last reported in the Red Larch area, and send them off on their way. And I would give them a lead into what you view as the most suitable location for them to start with. Something like Feathergale Spire, or even the adventure, which is the missing delegation. So send them into the location of that. And whether they're following a rumour or tracks, it's really up to you. I don't want to go into Princes of the Apocalypse too much because I feel like it's a complete waste of your time. But as people have probably asked me more than a few times about it, I'm answering that question. So I've answered that question. If you have questions, you let me know about it and I will get back to it, but I'm hoping that nobody does. I'm very biased about Princes of the Apocalypse, which is annoying because I really like the elemental nature and the pirates, and it's just that the Dwarven City, the delegation from the Dwarven City of Mirrorbar going missing, it doesn't make sense. You can't find the information. It's all scattered all over the place. And what doesn't make any sense too is this adventure it's got like 2 pages of adventure hooks. So how can it get stuffed up? But it is. It's a walking mess. I would definitely use some of the adventure hooks that are provided on pages 12 through to 13, 14. Yeah, use them. Anything that will get them chasing the delegation of Mirrorbar. Okay, alright, next topic. Which is, I'm just looking through my little collection of things. Now I like this adventure a lot. That is Out of the Abyss. Out of the Abyss is an awesome adventure. It really is. I like the idea. I like the idea of the Underdark. A lot of people do, which is why they always want to go from the Lost Mine of Phandelver into Out of the Abyss. It actually makes a lot of sense. But there's some problems. And I will explain them. And I will also explain how you can get through some of them. And the first thing is that this thing is not suitable for new dungeon masters. It's not really suitable for a new dungeon master. If you are new to the game, this requires an enormous amount of prep. I have not got an index for you to get through this thing. I spent 2.5 days trying to put one together and I gave up. It was that hard. It's hard for a experienced dungeon master to run Out of the Abyss. The index would have been just the icing on the cake if they had one, which they don't. They don't. It needs an index. It's a huge sandbox. They can go literally anywhere. It has an awful lead-in and start. So I would ditch the start. The start of this is they start off as prisoners of the Drow. I would completely ditch that and just fast forward past them running from the Drow after they were prisoners. I wouldn't even go into their first chapter. I believe it is the first chapter that deals with being a prisoner of the Drow. Otherwise, you're just making life difficult for yourself. Now, why should this make more sense as a lead-in from the Lost Mine of Phandelver I'll explain to you why. Because Wave Echo Cave is underground. They have been fighting an individual who is a drow. And if that particular individual manages to escape, which might happen, Nesna the Black Spider, it would make an awful lot of sense that you be able to lead in with that particular character as they chase Nesna the Black Spider down into the depths of the earth, into the Underdark. Even if that's not the case, finding a crevice or crack in Wave Echo Cave that they can follow after they have completed Lost Mine of Phandelver, it's the perfect lead-in. The only problem is, it's an awful mess to run. So how do you deal with that? As I said, ditch Chapter 1, being Prisoners of the Drow, go straight into the On the Run. The problem is you're dealing with madness, you're dealing with chasing and travel, you're dealing with all sorts of different aspects, the Drow pursuit mechanics, narrating the story. It's really just a giant collection of random encounters, which is what makes it problematic. Because how do you deal with something, a big collection of just random encounters? How do you put them together and still retain a consistent story that makes sense? What I would suggest you do, though, if you do this and you decide you have to use Out of the Abyss, is chop that thing apart. Chop it apart and use pieces. Ditch all the random nonsense. You can have one or two of those and just pick the small adventures that they have scattered throughout and use those. And I wouldn't even necessarily use every single location. If you can ditch certain sections of it, I would do so. So I would be piecemeal about the use of Out of the Abyss and their content. You don't have to go all the way. And a lot of people have had to heavily modify Out of the Abyss to make it work. I don't understand why it came out as... Wizards of the Coast has got a lot better at putting together adventures. But this is one that they released, and it was just a really big, huge collection. I feel like it's more like a Underdark campaign book part story as well. And there's the problem right there. Okay, so that is my view on Out of the Abyss. I think I've covered pretty much everything I needed to say about that. Next one on my list. I have actually been reading a lot of this particular book recently, and that is the Tomb of Annihilation. The Tomb of Annihilation is basically Chris Perkins' attempt to try to outdo Gary Gygax and his Tomb of Horrors. And honestly, I think he's done a pretty good job. I would love to run the adventure. I don't know how many friends I will have left after I have run this thing, because it is a huge sandbox. Not only is it a huge sandbox, it's incredibly deadly. So if you're going from level 1 to 5, Lost Mine of Phandelver, into something like the Tomb of Annihilation, not the Tomb of Horrors, but the Tomb of Annihilation, it's a big jump in power and skill level required. This is a massive sandbox. It does have some limited boundaries, so the chapters are sort of structured a little bit in such a way that you can probably get through it, but there's one chapter in particular, I think it's called The Land of Chult, where you get just a big bunch of random encounters that you put together in a way that you sort of make sense to you. And there's half the problem there. It's a huge section. It goes from pages 37 right through to pages 90 or 91, and it's just a big collection of random encounters that you place, that they can come across. So that's why I don't really like that particular adventure for it. That doesn't mean that I would not run it as level 1 through to level 15 or whatever adventure, because I absolutely would, provided I can find some players who are willing to deal with the brutal mechanics. Death is dealt with brutally. It's like a meat grinder option there. When your characters die, they're gone. It will probably drive the players absolutely mad. It requires a lot of preparation and planning. I've already spent many hours reading the book, and I will have to spend more hours actually getting myself through this. And it could actually result in your players hating you as a dungeon master, which is why the Tomb of Annihilation isn't necessarily well married up for the Lost Mine of Phandelver. Now, how do you enter this and make it work? To be fair, you probably can enter it from level 5 and it won't be an issue. And the reason being is you just ditch a lot of the combat encounters as they explore the land of Chult, and you use something else. Whether it be sights or sounds or role play, because there have been a lot of comments about the Tomb of Horrors just having too many random encounters. As they explore the location, because it's a hex grid, they're going to get bored. So just ditch a lot of that. Eliminate that, and you won't need to worry about the power levels. It is a really difficult adventure anyway, so them being level 5 is probably not going to be too much of an issue. That's my view anyway. I have not run it yet. I've only been reading it. Okay, the last one that I need to talk about, which almost looks like it has been designed for the Lost Mine of Phandelver. And that is, yes, yes, that's the one that was just talked about not so long ago, Storm King's Thunder. Storm King's Thunder. Now, it's not perfect, but they have actually attempted to try to link this adventure in with the Lost Mine of Phandelver, which is very useful to you. The problem is it hasn't been available for, it's a fairly recent book. You know, it's been out a little while, but it wasn't available when you first started playing Dungeons and Dragons 5e and using the Lost Mine of Phandelver. For those of you who are playing now, benefit is you get access to it if you want to. So here are the good aspects of Storm King's Thunder and going from the Lost Mine of Phandelver into Storm King's Thunder. It's not a sandbox. It doesn't just have some structure, it has a lot of structure. It's just its way it's formatted and laid out requires a lot of rereading. So the layout and its formatting requires you to reread sections, and you will have to hunt through it. I found when I ran part of this adventure, and one of my friends dungeon mastered the adventure for me, and I could see him. He's a lot smarter than I am, and got a much better memory than I do. And he had a lot of trouble just navigating through Storm King's Thunder and finding stuff. So you'll still find it difficult to run because there are walls of text that you have to navigate through to find information. They have really tried to make an effort to make it work, and they've created you a contents page that's a little bit like a mini index. It's not a full-fledged index though, but it does act slightly like one. And part of that makes life a lot easier. Now the thing that's really good about it is they have literally, it almost looks like an index of locations. And also the chapters are very short. Each chapter isn't that long. They may be 15, 20 pages long. It's roughly the size, so it's a manageable size generally to work with. But it's still very involved. They've also included a non-player character summary. Now this is very good, and you'll find that on page, it's after the contents page. It's called Dramatis Persona, and all of the major NPCs are here. The only problem is it's not all of the PCs. Some of the NPCs are not included here. These are just the important ones, the major ones. So when you come across a non-major NPC, you're going to find yourself hunting through the book, trying to find information on them. There is at the back what I would consider to be classified as a really sort of short breakdown of certain characters. These are some of the smaller NPCs or major NPCs. It gives you a stat block, sort of how to roleplay them, useful for you and the players. The problem is this is designed to hand over to to players, because otherwise if there's just so many NPCs, it's like Out of the Abyss. There's so many NPCs in the same scene sometimes that you have to hand NPCs over to your players to run. What's that, Eric? I think a lot of what's ditched with Princes of the Apocalypse, like Yatar, can also be used with Storm King's Thunder. Also, then at the end, tie-in ending of Rise of Tiamat. Yeah, well, I suppose it could certainly work that way. I feel like the Storm King's Thunder and the Tyranny of Dragons storyline are certainly very closely related. So you could sort of link them up, but it would require quite a lot of work on your part. What is the other thing I needed to point out regarding Storm King's Thunder? It has a flow chart. It actually gives you a flow chart that shows you what chapters fit where and roughly what level the players will be when that occurs, or that part of the adventure runs or takes place, whatever events are there. And it's on page 17. And it literally gives you, chapter 1 is the Great Upheaval. So you ditch the Great Upheaval, since it covers levels 1 to 4, and instead it says other published adventures, levels 1 to 4. And then it refers you to the Appendix A. And in the Appendix A, it actually explains how to tie the Lost Mine of Phandelver into Storm King's Thunder. This is why I wanted to leave it last, because it's the only one that's really, they've made an attempt to sort of tie it into their starter adventure, and it could work. It's still going to require an increase of skill on your part compared to what you used to be running with Lost Mine of Phandelver. So you're going to start chapter 2, Rumblings. You'll be level 5, and you pick one. There's 3 options. There's Tribor. Now, Tribor is nice and close to Phandalin. You've got Brain Shandur and the Golden Fields. So you pick one of those, and that's where they sort of start. And then from there, the flow chart indicates where you go, which chapter you run next, so it's easy for you to put together, and then where it branches off and where they can make decisions. So it's got a couple of options, but it is still relatively linear and well structured to make life a little bit easy for you. But there are walls of text in this thing, and you need to be warned that you'll probably find yourself having to reread sections of it or hunting for information. I know my Dungeon Master had to hunt for information more than a few times. So let's go to Appendix A, since this is the only one out of all the adventures that actually talks about how to tie Lost Mine of Phandelver into it. There's this particular adventure, and if I can just find the page, Appendix C is not what we want. We've got Appendix A. I do apologise if I'm flipping through pages. As I told you, we'll find you'll be doing a lot of this anyway. Alright, okay. Appendix A, linked adventures. So the Lost Mine of Phandelver. So it talks about, very briefly, a couple of paragraphs, how this can work. And it suggests using some of the NPCs in Phandalin to direct the characters to Tribor. That's the link in. Through the Lion Shield delivery with Lynn Greywind, or a demanding letter that Harbin Wester can give to them, or the Zentarum connection, which the Guildmaster of Phandalin's the mining exchange, is it Hela Thornton. Those are probably some of the best links that you're going to get from any of the adventures that are pre-published. That is my advice for you in terms of how to deal with linking your Lost Mine of Phandelver into whatever you want to run next. I've covered all the things I wanted to cover, which is good, because I'm about to lose my voice, and if I lose my voice, that'll be the end of that, right? So I'm going to just jump over to here. There don't seem to be a lot of comments and questions, which is, I guess I've answered the questions that people had. And certainly Eric's provided some insight into how that can work. So yeah, if you found this video helpful or informative, please share and like the video. If you're not already subscribed and you like this sort of content, well, there's going to be more Lost Mine of Phandelver videos and a lot of other videos anyway, then consider subscribing, hitting the bell button to be notified when I go live. If you want to support my channel, you supported my channel by watching this live stream, and I do appreciate it. Thank you very much. If you want to continue supporting me, watching more of my videos is going to be really helpful. On top of that, I don't do Patreon, but down in the description you'll find affiliate links to the book depository and Amazon, where you can buy stuff online. I get a small commission. You pay exactly the same price as you normally would, and you just go through the link and you can buy what you like, okay, from the book depository and Amazon. You don't have to buy the thing I've linked to, just go through that link. Otherwise, now is a good time to start typing in the live chat box if you have other stuff you want to discuss with regard to these adventures. We certainly will discuss them if you want to. And if you're not part of the live stream, down in the comments section is where you need to put your feedback and discuss. You know, there'll be somebody out there who's tried linking Lost Mine of Phandelver to some of these adventures who will have a better idea than I do. I did some homework to make sure I wasn't talking out of my rear, okay? But that is my 2 cents or 10 cents on the topic. And hey, till next time, keep rolling those 20s.